Okay, we're not going to get through all his books, but I do, because years ago, it was Greg Tate and
Arthur Jafer.
They did this performance for Intermediate Arts where they just talked, and they agreed they were going to talk until everybody left.
I was the curator. I'm sitting where this brother's sitting right here. And I'm like, how long is this going to go on? We had a party scheduled for post show. People went out, went to bars, came back for the after party, and these brothers were still up there talking. It was hilarious. We can't do that.
Yeah.
Val will kill you.
I promise you, we're not going to do this tonight. But I do want to ask you about the innocent classroom. But before, we'll go about 10 more minutes, and then we'll open up for questions, okay, from the audience. So I want to talk about Amistad. How many of you seen the movie? Yeah, most of you seen the movie. So you know the movie. If you know the movie opens with the slaves revolting on the ship and attacking the Spanish sailors on the ship. You don't understand what they're saying. There are no subtitles. So it opens with an act of violence of blacks upon whites. And you don't understand what they're saying. The film is framed through the eyes of Roger Baldwin, who's a young white lawyer played by Matthew McConaughey. So Alex took this script of this film and really made an African American novel, a black novel. And if you had made a movie of his novel, it would have been a black film. So I want to talk to you about just the aesthetic choices that you made, how you started. I'm sorry, this is my wife.
She's a doctor, though. Come on.
So, can you just talk about the way that you opened why you opened the book the way you did, how you present the novel? And also, the other thing that strikes me is that Cinque is your first character who is really free from guilt.
Right.
He's innocent. He sees himself as innocent, but he's on trial. He's still on trial.
That's true. I never really thought about that. Well, when they asked me to do the book, I did a little research and then I wrote the book. I didn't read the manuscript until I sent them a manuscript of Amistad based on my story that I wanted to tell. And they sent it back to me and said, great job, but it needs to look a little bit like the film itself. So I mean, it's really important, I think, for writers. I mean, so first, I want to do this quickly. So first, writing Amistad was one of the most amazing experiences I had. It changed my life. It changed my career trajectory. It paid off for me. It did a lot of good things. But it wasn't my idea, and therefore I didn't get rich doing it, and that's the only negative side of it. The other part of that is that I learned that I was truly a writer because I could be given a story, and I could, so the way I talk about it is like they gave me the plans, but I picked the molding, I picked the floor, I picked the walls, I wrote this story. But the preface, the early part of the book is the only thing that remains from the original draft that I wrote. I took this on as a project of sort of embedding in this work a narrative and a theme that they couldn't see, that and I really never thought about Senkei's innocence. I was really thinking about home and about how most African Americans don't really know what home is, that it's a quandary, that home is a vexed place, and it's a place where police can come in and things can change, and our world is really kind of complicated. And I was just exploring this whole idea because I was dealing with Africans and African Americans, and for me it was the first time I had to come up against that dichotomy. It's like, what does it mean to not have any guilt within you? But I was also dealing with the moment where guilt is created. It's like when you think about Adam Smith said, the only true property, the true power of our existence in this culture is property. I mean, from an economic capitalist standpoint, and the only real property is your body. So when you give up your body, you in fact already are walking into so to be a slave. So it led me back to the Middle Passage and all the Africans who jumped off ship and to keep from being enslaved, and how we celebrate our strength and persistence and survival on Sundays in Black American churches. We survived, and it's a really powerful narrative. I get that, but what about the people who chose not to even go through that? What about, Toni Morrison tackles this in Beloved, and she does in other, it's like that's a really important question. It's like, how do you restore your sense of power and dignity and strength when you've given up your body? So, I was wrestling with all of those issues, and to me, in some fundamental way, this is where if there is an innate sense of guilt that African Americans carry, if that's true, and I'm not sure it is, it starts at that. It starts in that moment when we really consider the fact that we've had to climb completely out of slavery. I think where we are now, where you have an African American man who is president of the United States, there's a certain way. I was just listening to Nas, and there is a way in which, he has a lyric where he talks about, I didn't, change. Who would have ever expected that change? The change that there would be a black man in the presidency. It makes me look at the flag. I look at the flag in a different way now than I looked at it before. And I think, we are in a progression. I don't know what it means, I don't know where we are, but that depth of not being ownership, of being the owner of your own destiny, it's a long journey to the place where you are the maker of your own destiny. And all the writers that stand between that reality and this reality have been pushing us forward, trying to help us recover dignity and strength and power and the capacity to make decisions for ourselves that is untainted by the toxicity of slavery.
So we have a friend, Frank Wilderson, who's a memoirist and an academic, and he writes out of this school of thought called Afro-Pessimism. And in Afro-Pessimism, what they argue is that the ontology of slavery continues to exist in the present. And so this ontology views whiteness as human and therefore a citizen. It views blackness as non-human and therefore incapable of being a citizen. As a non-citizen and non-human, blackness is something which can be owned and sold, which can be fungible is the word they use, which is property. And violence can be wreaked upon the black body without justification or consequence. So there doesn't need to be a reason to wreak violence upon the black body. There doesn't be legal justification. You don't have to declare war.
And much more importantly, you don't have much recourse.
Yeah, you don't have recourse. And I remember when Frank first, when I first read Frank's book, and I thought it was very insightful and useful. It's called Red, White, and Black, U.S. Cinema and Racial Antagonisms. But I thought, is this really the case? But as time has gone on, I've more and more just said, yeah. If you read the new Jim Crow, if you look at the last year, if you look at the arguments that we're having about the damn Confederate flag, It's like the past is still living in the present. So, you and I sort of argue sometimes about optimism and pessimism. For instance, he thought Obama was not going to be elected.
And maybe shouldn't have been.
But I think on the other hand, that his argument that the country was not ready for a black president, I think in many ways has been proven true. So I want to ask you, where do you think we are today, given this year of Walter Scott, of Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, and, thankfully, Black Lives Matter?
What's wonderful about where we are is there is still hope. It's like a molting that is taking place in this culture. It's like we're scraping our backs up against wood, trying to scrape off the crap that has accumulated there so that people can't step forward. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on that. And I think that we just haven't come up with the proper technique of throwing history off. But this is where we come in. Like, people need to move. We need to move. So yes, there needs to be street action. There needs to be all that. But there also needs to be people thinking about this in a brand new way. It's like we need to move. We can't go back to the 60s for our tactics for struggle, in my opinion. There has to be some innovation here. It's time. And so I try to keep my focus very limited, because I think if you take a big picture look at this, it will lead to a kind of ennui, a kind of emptiness. It's like we're just going around in circles. There is a certain kind of circular familiarity with what is happening. And for those of us who are over 35, 40 years old, we've seen these moves where people are in the streets, there's this response, everything goes quiet, then there's something happens, then there's people in the streets, and we go through, and I'm tired of that. I'm personally tired of that. So I am not an Afro-pessimist, but I have, the novel I'm writing, The Slide, is based on Frank's theory, like that you can't win. That's his, I would summarize it as saying, you can't win in a society that doesn't acknowledge your ontological reality, that doesn't accept you as a human being, and that you have to fight for that recognition before you can get anything else. That's hard. But I think that's the journey we're on. And I think I said hope, but I think in my novel, the only way to respond to that, in my novel, my main character opens the book in a coma, paralyzed. He's already been beaten. And so the struggle then is, how do you pull it all back together to breathe life? And hope, and then love. Love is and this is, BS, cliche. I think when you're a person like me, some part of that is you just have to live with the BS, cliche part of me that believes that hope and love has value. I'm not buying into the despair of Afro-pessimism.